I used to think that losing someone only happened when they died. I was wrong. You can watch a person breathe, eat, and sleep right next to you while their soul is being slowly replaced by something unrecognizable, something dark, something hollow. My name is Arthur. I'm 36 years old. 6 years ago, I married the most brilliant, outgoing, and compassionate woman I'd ever met. We had a daughter, a home, and a future that looked brighter than I could have ever imagined. But today, I'm sitting in a quiet, empty house with a restraining order in my hand and a jagged scar on my forehead, wondering how a few internet forums managed to destroy my entire life. It didn't happen overnight. It was a slow drip. Did you hear about this? Here, the media is lying there. I didn't realize that while I was working double shifts to provide for our family, my wife was falling down a rabbit hole that has no bottom, and by the time I reached out to pull her back, she was already too far gone. The change began about 3 years ago when Sarah lost her job. At first, it was supposed to be a temporary break, but the house, which used to be filled with the smell of coffee and the sound of our daughter's laughter, began to feel like a library of the occult. Sarah didn't just scroll, she started taking notes. I'd find scraps of paper in the trash with names of politicians, arrows pointing to mysterious symbols, and dates of upcoming events that never happened. She became obsessed with hating a specific royal figure, someone she had never met. Yet, she spoke about her with a venom that made my blood run cold. I remember one specific Tuesday. I came home late, exhausted. I found the kitchen dark. Sarah was sitting at the table in complete silence, the blue light of her laptop illuminating her face like a ghost. "Arthur, don't turn on the lights," she whispered. "Why not, Sarah? What's wrong?" I asked, my heart beginning to race. "They can track the frequency changes from the smart meter," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "They know we're awake, they're watching the house." I laughed, thinking it was a joke, but she didn't. She looked at me with a cold, distant stare that made my skin crawl. That was the first night I slept on the couch, not because we fought, but because I was genuinely unsettled by the woman in my bed. As the months passed, the woman I loved disappeared entirely. She stopped being a mother. She stopped being a wife. She became a soldier in a war that existed only in her head. She began spending 12, 14 hours a day scrolling through underground forums and extremist telegram channels. The light from her phone was the last thing I saw before I fell asleep, and the first thing I saw when I woke up. The kindness I loved was replaced by a sharp, jagged edge of paranoia and racism. She started making comments about people of color and globalist agendas that left me speechless. She lost her friends. Her own parents stopped calling, telling me they didn't recognize their own daughter anymore. And the worst part, our 4-year-old daughter was watching. She would tug on her mother's sleeve, asking to play, and Sarah would just stare at her phone, muttering about saving the children, while neglecting the one right in front of her. I tried to keep us afloat. I took on extra hours, convinced myself that this was just a phase, a reaction to the isolation of being unemployed. But the truth was hidden in our bank statements. When I finally managed to get into our joint accounts, I felt like the air had been kicked out of my lungs. The money we had been saving for our daughter's college fund, the future fund we started the day she was born, it was gone. Tens of thousands of dollars vanished. I spent hours tracing the transactions. I saw payments to shadowy organizations with names like the Freedom Shield and the Truth Seekers Initiative. But it got even more bizarre. I found an email chain between Sarah and someone she met on a royal gossip subreddit. This person claimed to have a private investigator on their payroll who was exposing celebrities. Sarah had been sending them $500 at a time for gas money and equipment. She was paying a stranger for blurry photos of random black SUVs, convinced she was funding a secret intelligence operation. While she was saving the world from her laptop, our daughter needed new shoes for school. I was at the grocery store, sweating, praying my card wouldn't be declined for a gallon of milk, while my wife was donating our life savings to internet grifters. When I confronted her, she didn't apologize. She didn't cry. She screamed that I was small-minded and that I couldn't see the bigger picture. I decided to try one final thing. I begged her to go to couples therapy. I thought, maybe if she hears how close I am to leaving from a professional, she'll wake up. For a few months, it actually seemed to work. I saw glimpses of the old Sarah, the woman who liked to hike, the woman who used to bake cookies with our daughter. I started to let my guard down. I thought we were winning. But the internet is a powerful drug. The pull of the rabbit hole was too strong. She went back to the forums. She quit therapy, claiming the doctor was part of the system sent to brainwash her. The descent this time was faster and more violent. I found hidden packages in the back of the closet, designer handbags, expensive shoes, jewelry. She was buying a lifestyle she couldn't afford to mask the emptiness of her reality. I looked at the piles of expensive leather and the empty bank account. Then I looked at my daughter sleeping in the next room. That was the moment the scale tipped. I walked into the kitchen where she was, as usual, hunched over her phone. "I'm filing for divorce, Sarah. It's over. I've already called the lawyer." The silence that followed was terrifying. For 5 seconds she didn't move. Then something inside her snapped. It wasn't a normal argument. It was a complete psychic break. She started screaming about betrayal, calling me a traitor, and one of them. She began grabbing everything within reach. Plates shattered against the walls. A chair was flipped. She was a whirlwind of pure, unadulterated rage. And then I felt a sharp burning impact on my forehead. She had gripped a heavy glass cup and hurled it directly at my face from 3 feet away. I stumbled back, my vision blurring into a red haze. I put my hand to my head, and it came away soaked in thick, warm blood. My own wife had just attacked me in the home we built together. I didn't stay to fight. I didn't wait for her to calm down. I grabbed my phone, ran out the door, and collapsed on my neighbor's porch. As I sat on my neighbor's porch, gasping for air, the world felt surreal. My neighbor, a man I'd barely spoken to in years, was pressing a clean towel to my forehead, trying to stop the bleeding. Through the window of my own house, I could hear the sounds of destruction, the crashing of ceramic, the splintering of wood. Sarah was systematic. She wasn't just angry, she was erasing our life. When the police arrived, the sirens felt like a final bell ringing for my marriage. 2 officers entered with their flashlights drawn. They found her in the middle of the debris, standing in a kitchen covered in broken glass and spilled flour. She wasn't hiding, she was ranting. Even as they put the handcuffs on her, she was shouting about the truth and telling the officers that I was a deep state plant sent to ruin her mission. I watched from the shadows of the driveway as the mother of my child was placed into the back of a patrol car. The red and blue lights flickered across the toys scattered in our yard, a plastic slide, a tricycle. The contrast was devastating. The weeks that followed were a blur of cold courtrooms and heavy silence. I applied for a domestic violence restraining order immediately. For the first time in years, the house was quiet, but it was a heavy, haunted kind of quiet. In my search for answers, I discovered the QAnon casualties community online. For the first time, I didn't feel like a freak. I saw thousands of others who had lost their parents, their siblings, their spouses to the same digital virus. I learned that I wasn't alone, but I also learned a painful truth. You cannot argue someone out of a reality they didn't logic themselves into. Today, I have temporary sole custody of our daughter. Sarah has supervised visitation, but the visits are hollow. She doesn't ask about school or friends. She looks for signs of programming in her own child. She's facing criminal charges for the battery incident. She lives with a former co-worker now, still posting, still scrolling, still fighting a war that doesn't exist, while the real world, her real family, has moved on without her. My daughter still asks where mommy is. Sometimes she stands by the front door, clutching her favorite doll, waiting for a version of her mother that has been deleted from existence. How do you explain to a 4-year-old that the internet took her mommy away? I've changed the locks. I've installed security cameras, not to keep out burglars, but to protect my daughter from a woman who thinks she's rescuing her. Every time my phone buzzes, my heart skips a beat. I wonder if it's a new lawyer or just another anonymous email filled with hate. To anyone listening to this, watch the people you love. It starts small. A YouTube video here, a harmless theory there. But if they start talking about secret enemies and hidden truths, don't look the other way. Don't think they'll just grow out of it, because the rabbit hole is deep and it's lined with the wreckage of families like mine.
My name is Arthur. I lost my wife to a screen. I lost my savings to a lie. Don't let the shadows take your family too.